Hello, friends. Hour number 2 of the Matt Murphy Radio Show this Tuesday, February 17, starts right now. Glad to have you with us. Well, it's actually started. It started a few minutes ago with Ken Weaver's newscast at the top of the hour. We appreciate that, letting us know what's going on in the world, the traffic reports, the weather reports, et cetera, et cetera. Now we will opine on said same. You know, every time I hear the man talk about the plateau, I think about our In the Ghetto sounder. On the plateau.
On the plateau. It's going to be a little bit of snow tonight.
Grab your loved ones and hold them tight on the plateau. More of that on the way. I also have some real quick before we get to our good friend and guest, Congressman John Rose. So Gavin Newsom apparently is coming to town. And Gavin is like, "Oh, Tennessee's crap," basically is what he said before he came here. Let me tell you what California's number one in, and I want to give California their due. So, Gavin, congratulations. California's number one in a lot of things. California's number one in homelessness, number one in poverty, number one in addiction, number one in gas prices, number one in income tax, number one in gas tax, number one in budget deficit, number one in retail theft, number one in citizen exodus. They were number one in mask mandates during COVID, number one in school closures, COVID-related, number one in funding illegal migration, number one in illiteracy, number one in wage stagnation, number one in lawsuits, number one in worker restriction, and they are the number one state when it comes to anti-business regulation. Congratulations, Gavin. You are number one, buddy. Welcome to Tennessee, where we still believe in a semblance of freedom. We welcome Congressman John Rose to the program to talk to us about a number of issues out of Washington and a few right here in the volunteer state. John, always a pleasure to have you. Good afternoon.
Great to be with you, Matt. Thanks for having me on the program today.
So I thought of you guys. I wasn't quite sure whether or not you were in Washington, D.C. as a sitting congressman, but it's my understanding Congress is out of session this year. I thought about the issue involving the gunman there on the Capitol property, and it made me realize just how grateful we are to the Capitol police officers that not only protect you guys as you try to do the job up there on Capitol Hill, but also protect the general public as they tour the facility and as they walk through the National Mall and whatnot. It's just that's a scary time when you've got a gunman just jumping out of their car, rushing the Capitol, huh?
It is indeed. And, you know, regretfully, these kinds of things happen from time to time. Through the years, it's happened. In fact, we've had guards inside the Capitol, killed a number of years ago. And so it's always unfortunate. And I do have the greatest respect for the men and women who guard the Capitol. And it's an important thing to do. Just regretful that we live in a time when people are constantly trying this kind of nonsense and putting people unnecessarily at risk.
Congressman, is the government shut down in any fashion right now? I keep hearing that the Democrats, pumped the brakes on funding for DHS, but it's my understanding TSA is still open. It's my understanding that ICE is funded through 2028. Are we in a partial shutdown right now?
We are in a partial shutdown, and of course, it's the third the Democratic Party-led Schumer shutdown, since the fall when we had the 43-day shutdown. I think it's particularly troublesome, and it will be, I think, nettlesome and difficult to get past this because it is so narrow, but it does affect FEMA and the Transportation Safety Administration, Coast Guard, Secret Service, and Customs and Border Protection. And like these things go, and as we saw last fall, and then briefly, 10 days ago when we had a similar shutdown for a few days before the House could get back to Washington to pass the stopgap that then lasted only for 2 weeks. It's one of those things where people, the folks perhaps that maybe people interface with most regularly, TSA folks, they'll go without pay at some point. Obviously, here in the early days, before they come up on a pay date, little or no effect, but people are being furloughed, and it is delaying things even at this stage. And so it's not a good situation And it just underscores that the Democrats now have been willing to take us into 3 shutdowns just over the space of 3 or 4 months. And in each case, to protect, violent, criminal, illegal aliens. Last fall it was because they wanted to restore free health care for illegal immigrants that had come into the country. Now they're wanting to stop the deportation of law-breaking criminal, illegal immigrants and that, have done horrendous things. And so it's just unconscionable to me that the Democratic Party is willing to step up for these folks and for these issues and use the American people and our safety as a bargaining chip. If this goes on for any period of time, as it involves FEMA, it would, for example, delay storm relief for places like Tennessee that have suffered in the recent ice storm and similar incidents. So it's not a good situation. If it were to end quickly, the damage might be minimal, but I think we have to just keep in mind that the Democrats yet again are doing this, and this time to protect the worst of the worst, frankly. So it's just very disappointing and just remarkable to me that that's where the Democratic Party has brought itself to. As you point out, ICE is funded, so the group that they're most interested in trying to impact, they cannot impact because we funded ICE for a number of years through the One Big Beautiful Bill last year.
You, I guess it was a little over a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, where you and we haven't spoken since then. There was something of I don't know if it was a disagreement or just you had to have a meeting with the minds with the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. And I don't trust the mainstream media's reporting on this. I go to the source. I go to Congressman John Rose, and they reported that you were grandstanding and you wanted some sort of bargain. You voted along with Thomas Massie and a bunch of Democrats initially and then changed your vote. I just wanted to ask you what that was all about for you and why you ultimately, after that conversation, made the decision to change the vote.
Well, so, for some time now, I had been advocating and trying to encourage a vote on the Senate side of the SAVE Act, which we passed, over 300 days ago in the House. And unfortunately, Leader Thune over on the Senate side and the Senate have just refused to take it up. Now, I understand the Democrats are not going to help them, but Leader Thune, has not even attempted to bring this forward. And I think he was providing cover for some holdout Republicans as well. And so a number of us were trying to put pressure on Leader Thune, and I'd been messaging about that actively. As you may recall, the day before, there was some indication that Leader Thune had made an agreement to allow the funding bill to move forward, but then early the day we were voting and this all happened, he was quickly backtracking on his commitments. And so I wanted to reiterate and reinforce to Speaker Johnson that we are serious about this. And there's a constant give and take there and discussion with the Speaker, because he has the direct conduit to the leader on the Senate side and communicate there. And so I wanted to have a conversation with the Speaker about this, and sometimes you have to get their attention, and so that's what this was about. And that's really what I was advocating for. As the often happens in those situations, people start looking for ways to satisfy you other than the thing you're asking for. And so,
right.
That conversation got broader as it went on. And ultimately, though, I talked with the folks at the White House and I talked with the Speaker, and, we came to an understanding about how important this was. I was actually wanting to vote for this because we achieved another objective that I'd had, which was to jam the Senate into repealing the kind of crooked Senate payday provision that they had kind of forced us to swallow back in the fall when we were ending the first government shutdown. And so, I was happy to see that brought to an end and considered it a victory. But I also knew there aren't those many occasions when you have an opportunity to kind of drive the agenda and focus everybody on what's important. And so that day, I had a conversation with Anna Paulina Luna, who had been directly involved in conversations with the White House and with Leader Thune's people and the Speaker, and then a conversation with the White House, and then a conversation with the Speaker, and the Speaker made clear that he was on our side and that he would press this issue. As you know, then last week we passed the Save America Act, which is just an expansion and I guess further punctuating how important our elections are. One thing that I hear uniformly, and I was just speaking to the Wilson County Republicans this past weekend, Tennesseans want to see our elections protected, and it is a over 80% issue among Americans. So it is really amazing to me that Democrats in Washington are standing in the way of this when over 70% of Democrats agree that we should only let legal American citizens vote, and we should require photo IDs. So these are, as close to consensus issues as you can get when it comes to the American voting public.
Well, and it's getting the attention of the president, who said that if they can't get something across the finish line, he'll do whatever he can from an executive standpoint. I don't know if an EO passes constitutional muster, but he has indicated that. But I do see some movement on the Senate side, and are you hopeful? I don't know why John Thune is not demanding a talking filibuster at this point, but he's not. I would love us to go back to the 1975 rule where you actually had to stand in the well, and, in order to bust a filibuster, members had to actually be present as opposed to back in their home districts, enjoying, lattes or whatever they're doing, But Senator Hagerty indicated that potentially Susan Collins was on board on the Senate side, and John Thune has indicated at least more openness to moving toward a talking filibuster. Are you hopeful that we'll see the SAVE Act passed before the midterm elections is the question, John?
I am hopeful. I would stop short of saying that I would give it more than 50-50 odds right now, but I'm hopeful, and I think we are moving the Senate leader in our direction. And I agree with you about the filibuster, that it has become too easy for the obstructionists in the Senate to stand in the way of these things. And I don't believe that, I know Leader Thune has expressed, it's a lot of time. The amazing thing as we left Washington, and the Senate has gone into recess as well, and we've passed, I think, 49 bills through the House, and they've passed, I think, now a total of 8. A couple weeks ago it was 3. So they're, I understand they want to safeguard their time, but it doesn't seem to me that they've got a lot going on. So maybe they've got time to do a standing filibuster at this point.
Congressman, can I beg of you to do a quick commercial timeout and then come back on the other side? Because I want to talk to you about a number of state issues, and I want to have a good amount of time to do that. Do you have the time to do that?
Sure.
Okay.
Happy to. Thank you.
All right. Very good. Congressman John Rose is with us. Obviously, he represents the 6th Congressional District. He's also running for the governorship of the state of Tennessee. And we're going to talk about those matters, to include his criticism of CoreCivic and how he would like to see our prison system change in the state of Tennessee. We'll do that next on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. All right, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We are joined by 6th Congressional District Representative John Rose. He is on the line with us. He is also a candidate for governor of the state of Tennessee, and I want to turn our attention to some state matters. John, you know how much I appreciate your representation. You know how much I appreciate you being on the show with us so many years. And so I don't bring this up or ask this question with any insincerity, except to ask you, when are we going to see some movement? I mean, I don't. The polls are what the polls are, but everything that I'm seeing demonstrates that Marsha Blackburn has a commanding lead over you. It's 2026. I'm wondering, in race car parlance, I mean, at some point we've got to make a move here. Talk to me about what your moves are and what differentiates you between Marsha and what's going to get you across the finish line later on this year.
Sure. Well, happy to address that. And I don't think probably a racing analogy is the right one here, because that implies that you have to make up this huge distance, whereas in politics you just have to deliver the winning message, and then people can move in mass. And so as we saw in the 2018 election, the electorate can move very quickly and decisively, and so I think that's what we're going to do. I think it's about ultimately informing the people of Tennessee about who I am. and all the considered wisdom that that I've managed to collect and conferring with experts about this is that you need to do that at the right time, and so if you do it too early, it dissipates. If you do it too long, it annoys people and they become kind of callous to it, and so you have to kind of pick the right time. That's frustrating because, of course, Senator Blackburn, spent millions, $10-15 million just last year running to get a 6-year term in the United States Senate, a job she apparently never intended to finish. But it did have the effect of vastly improving her name identity across the state. And so that's the comparison that we see.
Mm-hmm.
The people of Tennessee are not yet focused on the governor's race, and that's typical. That's not some sort of problem. That's just the way this works. So we're going to be there with the right message at the right time to educate Tennesseans and inform Tennesseans about who I am and about what my credentials and qualifications are. And those qualifications are that I am the only candidate running for governor of Tennessee who has the CEO experience that the job of governor, of leading this state, really is. I have that experience. My opponents lack it. If you hire someone that doesn't have that experience, then you're going to see on-the-job training, and that's going to be expensive for Tennesseans because of the mistakes that will be made. And I think Tennesseans get that. They've proven time and again that they get that. That's who we've elected in the past. I spent 30 years of my career in the private sector building businesses, signing the front side of a paycheck, building large organizations, learning how to get the right people in the right seat on the bus. I've spent the last 7 years as a legislator in Congress, and that's been a very informative experience, but I can testify directly that experience is not what the job of being governor is. On a typical day as a member of Congress, and that's what my primary opponent has done, is she has been, a career politician and a career politician now in Washington in the swamp, and she you don't make those kind of management decisions. You manage a small staff of people, but mostly you're deciding whether to vote yes or no on issues, and you don't have to deal with the consequences. The job of governor is very different. So we're going to have the resources. I think that's one of the things that maybe my opponent hasn't counted on or didn't really anticipate. We've been blessed, so we'll have the resources to run the winning election. We've got more resources. We had more resources on June 30th last year than she has now. And so we'll deliver that message in a compelling and informative way so that the people of Tennessee can make an informed decision.
Quickly, John, and I would love an opportunity to speak to you a little more about this at length. You have recently criticized the privatization of our prison system, specifically CoreCivic, and I'm wondering if you don't feel like appropriate criticism should be leveled at the Tennessee Department of Corrections Commissioner Frank Strada. I mean, doesn't he control the system on the whole? I mean, obviously we have privatization in the state of Tennessee, but the buck stops with him, does it not?
Well, I think there's plenty of oversight and scrutiny that needs to go around here. On the campaign trail, I've been listening to Tennesseans all across the state. I'm in the far west, northwest corner of Tennessee today in Tipton County, where there is the Northwest Correctional Facility here, talking about these same issues. So you're right, Matt, that this is a bigger issue than just CoreCivic. But we are contracting with CoreCivic, and we ought to demand and expect that they will produce the results that we're paying to get. And of course, it goes beyond that because there are, yes, Tennesseans who are being, who are paying a price for the mistakes that they've made. But when you take that kind of custody of someone, as a state, we have an obligation to make sure that, that we're not putting them in an untenable situation. And unfortunately, too often that's what we see that has happened. And so we've seen lives lost that perhaps could have been saved, and just intolerable conditions at some of these prisons, state and CoreCivic operated prisons alike. And so I just, was calling attention to that to make sure that people understand, the people who are calling on me to address that issue, that I understand and I hear what they're saying.
Well, and I heard you say, and just a real quick follow. I heard you say, like, people have been talking about this situation for years. When I'm governor, I'm going to do something about it. So the question is, what are you going to do about it as governor?
Yeah, I think there are more facts to be gathered, but I'm going to make sure that we safeguard the lives of those people who are incarcerated and we don't put them in intolerable positions. And we're going to demand that not only the state system delivers that, but also any for-profit private operators deliver on their commitments there as well. I want to applaud the legislature, by the way, because they took some steps last year to hold CoreCivic to account, and we just have to make sure that we follow through on those obligations and make sure that happens.
John, it's the beginning of an important conversation that we need to have in the state of Tennessee regarding our prison systems. I'm glad that we can open up that door, and I look forward to further conversations on it, and obviously look forward to conversations with you throughout 2026 as our congressman and as a candidate for governor. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Matt. It's a great honor and privilege to represent the people of Tennessee, and look forward to those continuing conversations as we get the chance to make our case to the people of Tennessee.
That's Congressman John Rose joining us on the Matt Murphy Hotline for a few good moments. We've got 33 after the hour. My apologies to Ken for running a little bit late. Wanted to get that discussion point out about CoreCivic and the Tennessee Department of Corrections, and we did so. Your call's coming up next on Super Talk. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. My name is Matt Murphy. This is the Matt Murphy Radio Show. So we just finished up an interview with Congressman John Rose of the 6th District. John is also running for governor. I like John. John did not like my analogy of a NASCAR race. He said that wasn't the way to look at it with regard to his run for governor. At some point, you have to make a move, though. And right now, look, y'all know how I am with polling. Polling is only as good as the organization that's organizing the polling. Polling, secondarily, is a snapshot in time. Thirdly, sadly, many of these news organizations, they don't do polling for the right reasons anymore. They do. What happened? What did I just do? Every bit of my information that's on my computer screens just went away. I think I told it to restart. Did I just screw this up? Really? Yes, I want to restore the page. Hold on. Stand by, everyone. Everyone, cross your fingers. Okay, they're restored. Woo!
That's the way to go, Brother Murphy.
Oh, my goodness.
Technology.
All of my show prep would have been poop out of the window. So, oddly, I'm going to be defensive of the polling that I'm seeing regarding the governor's race. So it's not like me to look at polls and wag my finger at candidates who say, no, that's not the real deal. But everything I've seen, regardless of what you think about her, regardless of what you think about the race, John might be right that it's way too early to be thinking about this, but people that have thought about it are picking Marsha, and it's not close. And when I say it's not close by a margin of like 45 points. It's like Marsha Blackburn's 68% and John Rose 20 or whatever it is. So I just want to know when the fire's coming, and I'm just curious. He says, wait, you'll see. I'm not so sure. I'll trust him because I like him. I'm not calling this thing over. I'm just saying, if you expect that people are going to move from Marsha Blackburn to you, then that name ID that you recognize as a problem, you better start repairing that issue right now with all this money that you claim to have going up on radio and television and social media platforms and all that. Number two, and this for me, that's one thing. And John's in it to win it. That's what he claims. And I believe him. More concerning to me, John Rose came out 3 days ago and I guess a week ago and maybe 10 days ago, and he had strong language about our prison system in this state. And he said, I'm not quite, I don't have the quote in front of me anymore, but I'm pretty close to exactly what he said. He said, governors for the last however many years have been talking about this issue. When I'm governor, I'm going to do something about it. And so I asked him, John, what are you going to do about it? And his answer was, well, we need to study it more. Okay. Well, what then? I've long said that I understand that Core Civic as an organization is not a perfect one. I understand that they've had problems in the past, and they are attempting to make strides to repair some of those problems, but they're also a convenient whipping boy. Did you know, for an example, just an example, who makes the decision? Let me ask Jackson this question. If I can get a correct answer out of Jackson, I know I'm getting down to where the goats can graze on it. Who decides where prisoners go in our state system? In other words, prisoners have to go to certain prisons. It either has to be to a Core Civic prison or to a state prison. Who decides who goes to what prison?
The judicial branch.
The state decides. The Tennessee Department of Corrections assigns where these individuals go. Would it surprise you if I told you that by far the most violent criminals that get processed in the Tennessee judicial system go to Core Civic prisons and not to state-run facilities? Would that surprise you at all? Why do you think that is?
Money?
Because if that results in poorer prison conditions in the Core Civic facilities, then the Tennessee Department of Correction has a convenient scapegoat when the time comes. Just a thought. I'm not saying that Core Civic is perfect. I'm not saying that they're doing everything right. I'm just suggesting that one of these things is not like the other, and trying to compare the two and suggest that it's all a Core Civic problem and it's not the problem of Frank Strata and the Tennessee Department of Corrections is erroneous. Just not true. Now, we mentioned that Freddie O'Connell has a problem with some of his business owners saying that the property tax increases are strangling them. The other big issue in the city of Nashville has been the lack of performance from the Nashville Electric Service. Last month, we had it wasn't an unprecedented ice storm, as Teresa Broyles Applin wanted to claim, but it was certainly an ice storm that doesn't come around very often in the state of Tennessee. Our good friend Justin Owen of the Beacon Center has nailed this in a recent op-ed that he wrote concerning what happened and the aftermath of what happened. As a matter of fact, he just came out with this earlier today, and we often have Justin on, and we'll have him on again regarding this issue. But I wanted to share some of what he has written and give him the credit for it with regard to exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about the money, right? Because I've been saying that you can't have it both ways, and it seems that NES thinks that they can. You can't tell me for the last 3 years or 4 years that your focus has been on canopy and canopy protection and that you shrunk the money that was going into vegetation mitigation over the course of that amount of time per your own analysis and audits. And at the same time, you did not pre-stage the proper number of linemen and others necessary to deal with what might be the aftermath of not taking care of the canopy. But the bottom line is this. Instead of speaking directly to the people, instead of hiring a communications firm in the aftermath of the disastrous response that you had to the ice storm, you hired a bunch of lobbyists to go lobby the General Assembly. So as Justin Owen writes, so you can afford the lobbyist for the General Assembly, but you can't afford trimming the trees? Once the storm arrived, Owen writes, The NES failures snowballed. Reports suggest the utility was woefully understaffed with linemen. Neighboring Middle Tennessee Electric prepped 50% more of linemen than NES, despite serving significantly fewer customers and facing far fewer power outages. Even with the linemen it did staff, NES was reportedly unable to integrate them into its logistics, leaving many of them sitting idly by while customer outages extended into a second week. This was not only a logistical failure by NES. Despite spending $250 million on a text alert system designed to notify customers of power outages and power restoration, they scrapped that altogether because customers reported repeated erroneous updates and information based on that system that they spent $250 million on. He then goes on to say, given NES's rapid-fire failures, it's no surprise that city and state leaders are calling for change in how the utility operates. Those calls range from the firing of CEO Teresa Broyles-Applin to the reconfiguration of the NES board of directors. And how has NES responded to the crisis? They've hired a bunch of lobbyists, which is the ultimate icing on the insult cake. They've hired lobbyists. Not to make it better with you, not to go door to door and apologize to you, to go to the General Assembly and to make sure that they don't continue their effort to take over the operation of the board of directors, at least to get better results to the ratepayers in the future. 615-737-9986 is 52 after the hour on Super Talk.